With no end in sight to this devastating Gaza campaign, Israel's leadership is facing a growing crisis from within. The military chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, is openly clashing with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right cabinet, warning that the army is operating without strategic direction as the war enters its 22nd month, while several hardline ministers push to escalate the conflict, even at the expense of the remaining detainees. The military is demanding clarity, and internal divisions are deepening. Meanwhile, a chorus of former intelligence and security officials is calling for U.S. intervention to help end the war, signaling a leadership that may be losing both control and credibility. In the absence of a coherent strategy, Netanyahu's most dangerous battlefield may now be within his own cabinet. As cracks widen and military patience wears thin, how much longer can Netanyahu hold his war and his government together? That will be our discussion for today on In Depth. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Stay tuned. Tensions between Israeli Army Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir and the country's political leadership have reportedly reached a breaking point over the ongoing 22-month war in Gaza, according to the Cradle. Zamir is said to be demanding strategic clarity regarding the war's direction, criticizing the government for its inaction. The cabinet hasn't met for a long time, he reportedly pointed out, adding that the army is operating without clear guidance or directives. He also is advocating for a negotiated deal, suggesting that there is room for flexibility and that efforts must be made to reach agreement. Previously, Zamir warned that the army is exhausted and suffering from deep fatigue. Despite this, the Israeli government continues to push for the occupation and resettlement of Gaza. The news outlet also noted that Netanyahu is focused on achieving the release of detainees through what he calls a decisive military victory, a stance that has drawn sharp criticism from families of the detainees who accuse him of endangering their loved ones. Meanwhile, the Israeli cabinet is expected to decide this week whether to expand military operations in Gaza despite the potential risk to the remaining detainees, or to allow more time for a possible negotiated deal. According to the Times of Israel, a clear divide has surfaced within the security cabinet. Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir are pushing for a broader military campaign. On the other hand, Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir and Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar are reportedly advocating for continued diplomatic efforts to secure a deal. The news outlet reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz remain undecided. In a recent cabinet meeting, Zamir appealed to ministers to provide a concrete strategy for the army, pointing to the ongoing stalemate in ceasefire talks and the lack of clear direction from the government. While visiting troops in Gaza, he indicated that the coming days will be critical in determining whether a partial agreement can be reached to secure the release of the remaining detainees.
Nearly 2 years into the genocidal war on Gaza, cracks are widening at the heart of Israel's leadership. A sharp rift has emerged between Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right cabinet, with Israeli media reporting growing frustration inside the military over the war's told objectives. Hamas remains intact, Gaza lies in ruins, and detainees are still held. Zamir is openly challenging Netanyahu's team, demanding strategic clarity and warning that the cabinet hasn't met in weeks. The military, he says, is operating without a clear plan for what comes next. The friction has reached a boiling point. Echoes of past leadership struggles are resurfacing. Some now say Zamir could face the same fate as former Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi, whose ousting sent shockwaves through the ranks. Even Israeli far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, once Halevi's fiercest critic, now admits he misses him. Netanyahu has promised a crushing offensive spirit when he appointed Zamir, but that vow is ringing hollow. Zamir recently cancelled a trip to Washington, reportedly tying to progress in ceasefire talks, progress that remains elusive. With trust eroding, objectives unmet, and political rift intensifying, Netanyahu's coalition may soon find that its biggest threat is not on the battlefield, but within.
And for more analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, and Mr. Ibrahim Darawi, writer and political analyst. Welcome to Q News. I will start with you, Dr. Osman. Now, yesterday you provided us with a rather gloomy/realistic point of view regarding reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, with the updates, the cracks within Netanyahu's government, how do you view the escalating tensions between Israeli Army Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir and Benjamin Netanyahu, and how could this derail efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement?
Thank you for having me, Hala.
It was a pleasure.
Once again. And apologies on account of my rather grim assessment of the situation.
It's realistic, Dr. Osman. I mean, it's analysis.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it's dictated by the reality
on the ground.
Unfortunately. As for what's going on right now in the Israeli cabinet, there are divisions. They are not new. We remember the very troubled relationship between Benjamin Netanyahu and his former military chief of staff, Herzi Halevi.
Yes.
They had the same disagreements over the military strategies that do not necessarily go along with the political aims of the Netanyahu government, especially the far-right sector of his government, led by Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who basically are driving the idea of ending Palestinian presence inside Gaza at large, as we all know, and we discussed that in depth yesterday. And unfortunately, it seems that so far those guys are getting the upper hand in any argument they had. Last time they had their way and Herzi Halevi was fired. What's astonishing at this point is that Eyal Zamir is a hardliner. He's not like Herzi Halevi. He was completely on board with Netanyahu's war rhetoric before he assumed the responsibilities of commander of the army. However, when he commanded the overall military of the Israeli entity, he figured out that there are some challenges on the ground, that he might be implicated in some rather heinous acts, and not against the Palestinians. He does not care about that. Also, he does not see that, we cannot defeat Hamas. Of course, they can defeat Hamas. They have the overwhelming military superiority. However, he is concerned that Israeli military power might be used to kill the Israeli hostages and detainees. And this is something, of course, that he's very concerned about, that he might be legally liable for in the future, by the way.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view. It's personal now.
Exactly. It's personal. It's about his competency, and it even might be moral. He might not be okay with the idea of murdering his own citizens. However, it seems that Netanyahu does not care about the life of the remaining detainees. He killed many of the former detainees, and the military did that in many of their failed attempts to liberate or retrieve some of them. In their indiscriminate bombardment of the entirety of the Gaza Strip, they have led to the death of dozens of detainees and hostages, Israeli ones. And right now, there is a possibility that if they try to liberate those remaining 20 living detainees by force, it could lead to their death. And the thing is that probably the Americans even hinted that they know where the detainees are. And the Israelis also hinted that they knew where they are. And the military hints that they know where they are. However, they say, and they told Netanyahu, according to many Israeli media sources, that if we try to retrieve them by force, they will definitely, or most likely, die in the attempt, and it will not be successful. It will be tantamount to leading to their death. Apparently, the far right, Ben Gvir himself said, We should not treat those detainees as hostages. They should be treated as prisoners of war, bearing in mind that some of them are civilians. They are not prisoners of war, of course.
Mm.
So what Ben Gafir was aiming at was they are not that important. It's their fault they were captured. That's the kind
Mm.
of narrative that is being spewed by the Israeli far right in the government. So
Mm-hmm.
this is where the disagreements come. Netanyahu is a bit undecided. However, I do believe at the end of the day, either Eyal Zamir will play along and execute these plans, or he will be fired and replaced by someone else. If we compare this to previous situations with the head of Mossad, the head of the other intelligence agencies, the head of the military, all of them were sacked by and the Minister of Defense himself. You have Galant. We always forget that. All
Mm-hmm.
of those people were sacked and were fired, and it did not affect Netanyahu or his government in any way.
Okay. Mr. Ibrahim, with all the divisions that we are seeing, and Dr. Osman just explained to us, Netanyahu who only cares about staying in power. He doesn't care about the detainees. He doesn't care about reaching a ceasefire. All he wants is just to stay in power. So can Netanyahu maintain control over a fracturing cabinet while facing open dissent from the military's top chief of staff?
I think that what's happening in Israel is, a huge clash between the Israeli government and especially between the government and the military on a political level. This is the first time in Israel's history for this clash to happen between the executive forces, like what's happening between Netanyahu and the chief of. Okay, so this is the issue of the religion in Israel, and so what's happening in the Gaza Strip by the military. The military said this before the Israeli minister. He said that he will not be able to live with 2 million people in the Gaza Strip and take over Gaza Strip again. And so this is what the government wants. And today, the government is, the political level is really low. We have, and the military can't, fulfill the goals of the government, and so there is a clash between the military and the government and their different point of views. And so we're talking about the political side. They want to do things, I think it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to happen in Gaza. And so what happened in the withdrawal that happened in 2005 is what's going to happen to Israel if Israel keeps doing it this way. And also the prisoners with Hamas in the Strip. The government did not resolve this with the prisoner exchange deal. They should have gotten it over with, but they haven't had a deal with Hamas, and so we see them dying of starvation if they weren't killed, by the Israeli strikes. And so the Israeli side should get the prisoner, and also the Israel military are not capable of doing what they want, and they'll be meeting this week, and there were clashes between the military forces and the government. And so all this, I think that these are going in towards internal escalation. So we have a crisis in Israel today. If we look at what's happening in Israel on the political level, security level, civilian level, there is no real strategy for what's happening or what's going to happen after the ceasefire, or even having to do the prisoner exchange deal. And so this is the real crisis that the US is having with Israel internally and externally, by the way. And so what's happening in the US right now and what's happening in Israel also, they don't have a clear vision, what's happening in the war in Gaza and the starvation strategy that have reached the Israeli prisoners Gaza. And so the Israeli side, in the past periods, and the prisoners, um, with all the Palestinians and the resistance, with Hamas on top, and so they're starting to get affected. The prisoners are affected just as the civilians, and so it's been 2 years, and there was no clear vision, for to get the prisoners back, either by forcing them and having them starved, and he wasn't able to even get his prisoners back through negotiations. And so we see that there is a split in the Israeli policy, and also Benjamin Netanyahu. He also doesn't know what he wants. Everyone is walking in the path of escalation, but they don't know what's going to happen after this escalation. They haven't calculated the consequences. So the U.S. and Israel have strategies on how to govern the case after what happens. Israel thinks that they were able to end the resistance, and the resistance leaders, they think that they were able to end the resistance army Hezbollah in Lebanon, or even in the Irani Israeli war. And so I think this is a huge clash in the internal and external policy of Israel, especially that we have an external crisis with Israel, which is the erosion of trust, so they haven't got the trust of the world right now. And so this is pressuring the political and the what's happening today.
Okay, I get your point, Doctor, Mr. Ibrahim. I will get back to this point again. I want to go back to Dr. Osman now. As the war nears its second year with no clear goal so far, is Netanyahu's greatest threat now coming from within his coalition or not?
I think it is. I think that prolonging this war is the only thing that is keeping Netanyahu's tenure as a head of government viable and alive. Without this war, Netanyahu would be out of the job within a few weeks, and his governing coalition would collapse. He is hanging by a thread. However, he is still standing on solid grounds as things stands by the way he is administering his machinations and his schemes in order to do just that. He's very well and very well professed in playing these games in order to stay alive. There is a genuine will in Israel to prolong this war. Many Israelis do, especially within the establishment, within the political establishment, and within his governing coalition, want this war to go on until the complete annihilation of, or what they think could be the complete annihilation of Hamas, and of course the displacement of the Palestinians, the annihilation of the Palestinian cause, because they enjoy American support and they see this as a historic opportunity. Netanyahu is taking advantage of that and catering to the far right and the extremist elements within his society and government in order to ensure his political survival. However, when he ever attempts to placate the Israeli left or the Israeli opposition or the families of the detainees or his European allies and others, the price is usually his governing coalition being pushed to the verge of collapse. We saw that when he accepted the second ceasefire in January, Gfer resigned from the government, if you remember.
Yes.
And he begged Smotrich to stay, because had Smotrich resigned as well, it would have been over for Netanyahu.
Yes, because back then, Smotrich and Gfer were threatening to resign from the cabinet.
And they are still making these threats right now. And this is one of the main obstacles before.
And they clearly said that reaching a ceasefire would actually enable Hamas to get more powerful.
Exactly, to regroup and take control back of the Gaza Strip, or this is how they see it. So unfortunately, this is the situation we are in right now. Netanyahu's political survival depends on the continuation of this war. unfortunately. And that's why he is trying to prolong the war as much as possible until he can accomplish his war aims, no matter what the price that may be paid, including the lives of more Israeli soldiers. Their casualties are mounting in the Gaza Strip, and also including potentially the death of some or all of the remaining detainees.
Yes.
It seems that this is increasingly acceptable to Netanyahu and the majority of his governing coalition. So, and that's why, to be very honest, Hannah, I know I'm going to jump to another subject, but this needs to be said. Hamas needs to reconsider the strategy. The card of the detainees is not as strong and effective as it used to be. The Americans are on their side, so they need to reconsider their negotiating position. They need to realign themselves with their with the will of the international community, with the Arab will, with the Palestinian Authority, which is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people in this calculus, because this could actually disarm Netanyahu's reason.
And I would like to go back to this point, but I want to understand it more from you, Dr. Osman. But for now, back again to you, Mr. Ibrahim. Now, how long can Israel's generals execute a war that they no longer believe has any coherent objective?
I think that the Israeli government's goals towards Gaza is actually not coherent, and also the goals in executing this, they are kind of political. So if we look at what Benjamin Netanyahu wants to do, he wants to end Hamas and get the prisoners back, but he wasn't able to end Hamas completely up till now, and he also hasn't gotten his prisoners back, and so he connected or had the two things related. And on the way, we saw that Trump wants to make Gaza their own, and we saw that the Israeli side doesn't want to end this war, even with the with the American pressure from Trump on the Israeli government. And we also saw the displacement operations, either forcefully or peacefully, and the cleansing in Gaza. And we also saw a real change in the Palestinian occupied land. And so what's happening is that there wasn't a clear vision from the Israeli side of what's going to happen in Gaza. Even in the next day, they don't know what. I think that what Israel is going to do, I think that the extremism is a real crisis for the whole world, not just on Palestine, not just on Israel. It will be a crisis for the whole world, because all the religious governments, they also do things that they will not be able to keep up, and their vision is just to destruct. It's a strategic destruction plan. And so we saw what happened in Gaza, the mass starvation, the ethnic cleansing. We saw all this happening in Gaza, and it's happening all over. And the world is now very mad with what's happening with Israel's strategy. And also we saw that Netanyahu did a humanitarian operation to get aid into Gaza, and this aid is not enough. Before what happened in Al-Aqsa, we're talking about around 6,000 convoys entering, and what happened after what happened in Al-Aqsa, we're talking about 1,000, but today around 125 convoys only enter Gaza. And so Netanyahu talks and says that he gives them a little aid to have Hamas give in and give them their prisoners back. But the US and Israel, they don't understand this. Even the US is leading and controlling the whole war. And so and yes, they're as entangled. The US is entangled in this also, and they're engaged, because we saw how much control they have over Israel when they stopped the Irani war. And so Israel must know that there will be other resistance groups, even if Hamas is over, unless
Yes.
we find the perfect solution,
Yes.
to get aid into Gaza, the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip that Cairo put in a proposal, and then a two-state solution. We want to reach
Of
that.
course, of course. Dr. Osman, you raised a very important point, which is Hamas playing with the card of the detainees that is no longer effective. So, at what point does the cost of political survival outweigh the strategic interest of ending the war for both sides here?
You see, Hala, it pains me to say this. It really pains me. But it seems that Hamas is playing a very similar game to the one Netanyahu is playing, unfortunately. Now they have an interest in prolonging this war as well. You might ask me why.
Why? I was just going to ask you why. Yes, why?
Yeah,
Is it in
and
their
then
own interest to maintain the situation as is? In what way?
exactly, because it seems that that before the words they said and all the talk they made about relinquishing power in the Gaza Strip, it seems that this was not really genuine. It seems that they really intend on continuing to maintain power in Gaza, and this is what some of their spokespersons have hinted several times, both ones who died and ones who are still alive, unfortunately. So it seems, and now what happened was that the international community, after it has been mobilized against Israel's genocide, the Arab world, Europe, Egypt, China, Russia, everyone says that there has to be a two-state solution. Israel has to stop, and Hamas must relinquish power and disarm. This is the consensus of the international community. The only people who are against this
Yes.
are Israel, who want to continue this war, the United States, who support them in doing so, and on the other hand, Hamas and the lunatics who are backing them on Iran, who are already hanging by a thread. I will be completely blunt with you, Hala. So unfortunately, they do not have an interest in ending this war in a way that will force Israel to withdraw, but so that Israel can withdraw and a peace process can be restarted and reconstruction can be started. Hamas with its weapons has to be out of the picture. They can only be there as another Palestinian political faction within the Palestinian political spectrum. Apparently, Hamas, or at least Hamas's leadership, or some of them at least it seems, or those who speak to the media, from what we hear of them, do not really agree to these terms. And this plays directly into the hands of the Israelis and the Americans. They abuse it. We have seen how Steve Witkoff threw them a piece of bait, and they caught it because they are naive. When he said that, he lied. And he said that Hamas agreed to disarm after denying that there was a famine in Gaza, if you remember. Immediately, they said, no, we are not going to disarm. Why did Witkoff do that? He did that to show the world that you are saying that recognizing Palestine and ending the war is conditional to Hamas disarming and leaving power. You said that, Europe, you said that, Arabs. So Hamas now just said that they will not relinquish power, so we will continue this war. You see how bad things are, Hala?
And the Palestinian people are the only people paying the price for such a complex situation.
And the only victims, and even Hamas's fighters on the ground, and they are resistance fighters, and we admire them, are paying the price of the incompetence and the selfishness of their political leaders, unfortunately, who most of them live abroad, a very lavish life, with millions and even billions of dollars in their accounts, and they can care less about the suffering of their own people and their own fighters and families inside Gaza on the ground, unfortunately.
Well, that was Dr. Muhammad Osman, International Relations Specialist. Thank you so much, Dr. Osman, and also Mr. Ibrahim Darawi, writer and political analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Ibrahim. Thank you both for your valuable insights, shedding light on this very complex, realistic situation on the ground in Gaza. And this concludes today's episode of In Depth. My name is Hera Al-Hamalawi. I thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. The top stories coming up next.